Hey everybody, this is Gary from Constricted and Addicted. When I first got into the boa hobby, I got what I thought was a Colombian Red Tail Boa. I didn't know any better, right? And this was back before social media, so there really was no correction. We didn't know, or maybe people knew. It wasn't as talked about then as it is now. So I grew up, I had pretty good sized boa constrictors. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed showing them to people a little younger, different time period. There was a lot more like the shock value of owning a boa constrictor. And what I did was to get the boa constrictor larger and to, get more oohs and ahs from it when you showed it off to people, right? We did that for a long time. And this is through the 80s and the 90s. And then all of a sudden we've got the introduction of social media. And social media was a great platform, right? It kind of broadened our network of people that had boa constrictors. It broadened our knowledge of how to take care of them. There was a lot of really good things that took place with the introduction of the internet and social media and the keeping of these beautiful animals. But along with it came, especially on the social aspect, the social media aspect of it was people, knowledge, attitudes, and of course the internet armchair quarterback, right? The guy that really does nothing more, but he sits and he waits for somebody to post something so he can put all his knowledge out there about what he knows and tell you what you're doing wrong, right? These are the people that I consider to be the armchair internet quarterbacks. So I remember I bought Matilda, and I had gotten out of the boa hobby for about 10 years or so. So when I got back into it, I'd done some research. I wanted to improve my husbandry skills. I really wanted to up my keeping and provide a better environment for my boa constrictors that I was getting ready to reintroduce myself to. And now I'm raising babies. I don't have subadults. I don't have full-grown boa constrictors. I'm purchasing babies, and I want to provide the best environment for them. But the funny thing is that with the introduction of Facebook, and now you've got boa constrictor Facebook forums, and I post a picture of this what I called a jungle hypo red tail boa, and immediately people jumped on me about that's not a red tail boa. Hey, you get your stuff right, blah blah blah, right? And it kind of hurt my feelings in the sense that I didn't know any better, and I thought I knew better, but yet it wasn't really brought to me in this really positive and gentle and loving way, right? It was brought to me in a sense that I was doing it wrong. I had the wrong species. I should know better. And this is what I consider to be the internet armchair quarterback, right? The guy that sits there and waits for someone like me to post that I have a red tail boa, and it's not really a red tail boa. It's just a common boa constrictor, or a morph boa constrictor, as we call them. So what I did is it forced me to start learning more about locality boa constrictors and what is a red tail boa. And trust me, the armchair quarterback threw pictures of a true red tail boa at me. And I really, like I said, I didn't know any better. So what I did is I started researching, I started going to the internet, I started looking at pictures of red tail boas. I started to get a better understanding of what a red tail boa was. And I started to learn that this misnomer of a Colombian red tail boa was in fact coming from pet stores, and it was coming from places that sold snakes as Colombian red tail boas. So someone like me who bought from a pet store, I thought it was a red tail boa. I thought that was just kind of the industry name for the boa constrictor. I didn't realize at the time that there was such an animal, or that there really was a red tail boa that was a separate species from the rest of the boa constrictors. So as I started to learn more about it, I started to learn more about the species of the boa constrictor, such as the boa imperator, the boa constrictor constrictor, the boa constrictor occidentalis, the boa constrictor longiquata, and the boa constrictor saboge. So there's many genuses or classifications. I don't know which one is which, but there's many different classifications of the boa constrictor. But the common boa constrictor, or the Morph Boa constrictor, is a boa constrictor imperator. The true red tail boa, the Suriname, the Peruvian, the Guyana, there might even be a couple of more out there. They are boa constrictor constrictor. Now, I have Vin Russo's book, and I could probably go back and read and learn why there was the division or how the two species evolved the way they are. I'm a picture guy, so I do little reading and a lot of picture reading. So anyways, as I started to learn more about the boa constrictor imperator, I learned that that was really the normal boa constrictor. But what we have done, or what breeders have done, have taken different morphs, and we start to breed the genes together. So we end up with like what Matilda is. Matilda is a normal boa constrictor, but she's got the jungle gene and she's got the hypo gene. So it kind of paints her body in a sense where it gives her different saddles, different patterns. It removes some of the darker colors from her. And what's really neat is that she has this tail and it's orange. And a lot of people have asked me about my red tail boa, but she's not a red tail boa. And it's kind of hard to go into the explanation of, well, she's not really a red tail, she's just a common boa. So what I typically do is I just describe her as a boa constrictor. And but as I've gotten into this, and I've been in this hobby now for some time, and I've done my research and I've done my reading, I understand and I know the difference between boa constrictor imperator, boa constrictor constrictor. And those are the two species that I'm going to talk about, because those are the two that I think get commonly confused, or people purchase and they get upset when they find out that their so-called red tail boa is not a red tail boa, but it's a common boa constrictor. And one of the things I'd like to say is that some of these common boa constrictors can grow up to be some of the most beautiful, docile pets that you'll ever have. And sometimes you can get a boa constrictor constrictor that can be very difficult to handle. So the thing about the like the pet stores and their mislabeling of the snakes, that can happen in regular reptile stores, where I was just at a few months ago, and they had a hypo salmon red tail boa in there. And I'm usually not that guy. I'm not going to come up to you and say, hey, do you know your snake's not a red tail boa? But if it's a pet store and they're selling it as a red tail boa, I might be more inclined to walk up to them, because I feel like they should know better, and ask them, do you know that that is not a red tail boa? It's a morph boa. And the lady, she said, yeah, I know that, but we'll sell it faster if it says red tail. So it's amazing that some of these stores, they have employees that know that it's not a red tail boa, but yet they will still label it as a red tail boa to sell it. They did the same thing kind of with a Hog Island Boa that they had there that was not a Hog Island Boa. It was definitely it was a Morph Boa of some sort, but the guy that brought it in called it a Hog Island Boa. I have a Hog Island Boa, so I know what a Hog Island Boa looks like. And I explained to her that that was not a Hog Island Boa. And when I went back 3-4 weeks later, that snake was still in there labeled as a Hog Island Boa. So, you know, a lot of this stuff, we have the pet stores to blame. I've even seen it on Morph Market, where I go looking for, browsing through the boa constrictors, the newly added boa constrictors, and I see Colombian red tail boa. And it's a boa imperator. So a lot of this stuff comes from people either trying to sell their animals, or people misinformed, not knowing any better, and describing the animal as something that it's not. So as I started to do research, I started to look more and more at the true red tail boa which is the boa constrictor constrictor. Now, what I had found out, and I had heard from many different sources, is that owning an animal like this one right here, this is a Suriname. I want to show you my Suriname real quick. And the really distinctive identifying factor is the tail. Now, there's a lot of other identifying factors as well. Number one is usually the headband, the spear, the face markings. Let's see if I can get a good picture of his head. They are distinctively different than my Morph Boa constrictors. Just a definite more, there's pink in it. It's got a band that goes all the way from his neck to his snout. And definitely the spear. And I don't know if I can get the spear in there because he's pretty active. He's also got a lot of speckling under his belly. And that is something that I don't typically see in the Morph Boa constrictors. Now, the saddles on my Suriname are, they're not on every Suriname. As a matter of fact, when I first started looking for Surinames, I really wanted to find one that had the high peak saddles. Let's see if I can show them. I really wanted those high peak saddles. When I was looking on Morph Market, all I could find were round saddles, but they were true Red Tail Boas. You could tell, when you have a BCC, a boa constrictor in your hand, and you have a Morph Boa constrictor in your hand, you can tell the difference right off the bat, the difference between the two. But I really wanted these high batwing, these high batwing type of saddles because I think they look really, really neat. So I looked and looked and looked, and finally somebody had contacted me regarding the high peak saddles that I was looking for and said that they had a couple, and I ended up purchasing from that person. His name was Craig Land, and I don't believe he's selling Surinames anymore, but I am so grateful that I ended up with the Surinames that I did. I bought a male and a female, and the female went to a friend of mine, and I kept the male. So, of course, one of the other identifying physical factors, and I want to make sure that I explain that these are the physical factors of the BCC, not so much the locality factors, is again the tail. Now, one of the things about my Suriname is that the tail is just super bright and super long. It's beautiful, and I love this guy. So the requirements for taking care of this snake, what I found out, were a little different. And not so much, they weren't different. I shouldn't say they were different, but you had to be really on point with what you were doing, keeping the heat where it needed to be, making sure the humidity, and I think that's been the big thing, right, is making sure that the humidity is where it needs to be. These guys thrive at 70%. I mean, if you keep your humidity at 70%, this snake is going to do just fine. And that's been my experience because I've got two of them, and actually I keep every one of my boa constrictors because of these guys at that setting. No problems. And sheds are always good. Their digestion is always good. Their poops, they're never had a bad poop. And yes, I do monitor their poops. So everything, and I think that's just got a lot to do with the husbandry, but a lot of it has to do with humidity and making sure that their substrate doesn't get dry. Their humidity gauge doesn't drop. It's really about making sure, and it is taking an extra step to make sure that you go in there, check their humidity, and make sure that everything is right where it's supposed to be. And I think, the other thing is that a lot of us may like to overfeed our boa constrictors. And with these guys, it's real important that I make sure that when I feed him, I don't overfeed him. I don't feed him anything bigger than the middle of his body. And it's a very hard thing because, of course, I want to kind of put something bigger in there so that they'll grow up faster. But the reality is that, number one, when I start to do that, I risk regurgitation. Regurgitation, I've never had an animal regurgitate its food, never. But I know people that have, and your snakes can die from it. So I don't want to take that chance. The other thing is that in my head, I don't think I'm feeding him enough. And if I take a look at what he was like when I first got him to what he's like now, he's like almost tripled in size, and he's not big around, but he's getting longer. So to me, that shows me that the feeding schedule and what I'm feeding him must be really working. So, for me, it was really important today, right? I'm not that guy. I'm not the armchair quarterback. If you post something on social media that says, check out my red tail boa, and it's not a red tail boa, I might sit and go, that's not a red tail, but I'm not going to post on your page and say, dude, you might want to check this out, and you don't have a red tail. I've even seen, like I said, Morph Market. It happens all the time. I'm browsing for stuff, and I see an ad for it's a boa imperator, but they've got it listed as a Colombian red tail boa, and I'm thinking to myself, you're on Morph Market selling animals. You really should know better. But the reality is that some people don't. And there was a time when I didn't know. And what I had to do was I had to really learn. This is not something that I think I'm going to be doing for a couple of years. Owning snakes is in my blood. It's something that I love to do. And it's important to me that I understand my animals, that I know what my animals are, and that I don't misrepresent my animals. But more importantly for me, in my own knowledge, that I take care of them. And I think with the love and the passion that I have for the animal, that is what really drives me to learn more about them. A lot of this stuff doesn't stick. Most of what I have is knowledge and experience. But the reality is that when it got pointed out, when somebody said to me, hey man, that's not a red tail boa, armchair quarterback, thank you very much. What you got me to do was you got me to get a little more educated, do a little more searching and digging and find out. And then I bought Vin Russo's book, and I've expanded my network of boa keeping friends through social media. So now I've got a lot more knowledge. I understand more between the species, the difference of species of the boa constrictors now, in which I do own an Argentine, boa constrictor occidentalis. I own a Peruvian longtail with boa constrictor longiquata. I own two boa constrictor constrictors. I have King Darius here, who's my Suriname, and I have Odin, who is my Guyana, and I also have a Tamaulipas cloud forest boa, along with a Nicaraguan. So it is, and a Hog Island Boa. And it's, just because you have a locality boa constrictor doesn't mean it's not a boa imperator. There are some boa imperators that are locality boa constrictors. But morph boa constrictors, like your hypos and your jungles and your Crouch pastels and your RDRs, your IMGs, your motleys, these are all morph boa constrictors. But this is just, one of those things where, I was on Morph Market the other day and I saw a boa imperator listed as a Colombian red tail boa. And, I'm, like I said, internally when I see it, it's like, God, don't they know any better? I mean, they're showing people that the boa imperator is a red tail boa. That's where the misinformation comes from. Pet stores, reptile stores, I've seen it all over the place. And like I said, what I had to do was dig, get information, and learn. And it's not something that I stopped doing. It's something that I continuously do because my love for the hobby grows. So therefore, I want my knowledge to continue to grow too. So I didn't want this to be a you should know better video, anything like that. What this is just my experience, what I see, what I've done to correct my own misinformation between the boa imperator and the boa constrictor. So I hope you guys like this video. If you have any comments, please put them in there. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Thanks.